Hello, Andy. Welcome to the Leaders Lab.
Oh, thank you for having me, Ken. And excited, having listened to some of your podcasts. I was listening to the Joe Rare, is it,
Yeah,
podcast a little while ago.
yeah,
And apart from all the great things he said, he was talking about outsourcing, and that went right to me. I've just taken on a virtual PA, and I thought this is a man that understands emotional overdraft. So I'm excited to talk about that idea with you.
totally. We've got a lot of overseas folks on our team too, so we can get into that a little bit. But I'm guessing you haven't always been the emotional overdraft guy, at least in terms of your work. So where did that come from? Tell me a little bit about either growing up, early career, wherever you want to start.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question, and I don't know if I've retrofitted the story to the book or if
Yeah.
I don't know what came first, but we're the sum of our parts, aren't we? So I started off. My family didn't go to university. My brother and I were the first two that went to uni, and you were kind of they did their bit. They brought us up well. They treated us nicely, and then they said you're on your own. So we kind of I had to pay my way through university, which lots of people don't have to. And I guess I learned a lot about I learned a lot about life having to do those two things together. So I paid my way through university working for as a researcher for advertising agencies in the town where I was at uni. And so I sort of got hooked on advertising and particularly the idea of understanding why people do what they do. So there's bad advertising, which is manipulation, then there's good advertising, which I guess is solving problems for people. And
Sure.
I loved that. I became a planner and spent most of my career. I mean, eventually I was running agencies, but I spent most of my career um, trying to understand why we do what we do and connecting the sort of what keeps you awake at night with the messaging for my clients and putting those things together. So that's where I started. But eventually I was what I got good at was running businesses. I did a business degree and I think it was a natural place for me to go. So I've run my own businesses. I've sold two of them. One I sold and did okay, and one I sold and did very not okay. So
Mhm.
I've experienced both sides of running businesses, and I love that. So the honesty on your podcast of people who come on and go, "Yep, I made a load of money and then I lost a load of cash,"
Yeah, yeah.
because that's the reality. That's the reality of most people who run a business.
Yeah, it's not only the reality, but there's no value in just the Instagram reels, right? Like nobody learns from how great we did, right? When we're not
Well,
talking about the
I don't think we personally dwell on how great we did enough. I
right.
think we know we're coded, we're still coded like cavemen, and you don't you don't survive the saber-toothed tiger by patting yourself on the back and saying, I survived the day. You have to keep, you're looking for the negative. So,
Sure.
and we're very good at that. We're good at finding the negative. I think I would argue that we don't congratulate ourselves enough and stop and go, well, what did we do well and what happened and why did that work? So, but I agree with you, by the way,
Yeah,
but
no, I
I just
think you're
think
right.
we should do that. We should
I,
remind ourselves to do that.
I think internally we beat ourselves up and externally we highlight all of our wins. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? It's like, well, I'm going to beat the crap out of myself, but the image that I'm going to put out there is my LinkedIn profile. Here's all my achievements and all of that. We don't talk about the business deal that went south, right?
Yeah, and of course I still look like my photograph on LinkedIn that was taken 15 years ago. Of course I do. That's the social media is not helpful in that way. But so I started running agencies, set my own up twice, and have run a business with other people. And I suppose about 8 or 9 years ago, I moved into advisory, particularly mergers and acquisitions. So there's quite a big business in buying and selling marketing communication businesses, particularly in the UK and between the UK and the US. And so I started working in that space as an advisor for businesses who wanted to build value and move to some sort of transaction. So it could be a sale, or it could be an acquisition, it could be a partial sale, or taking on investment or whatever. Uh, and that's when I really started to see how people subsidize the business at their own cost, where they
Right.
were, and it's universal. And I didn't have a name for it back then. And I recognized as I started to observe it, this is the luxury of standing back and observing other people. I recognized some of the behavior that I'd done. I mean, so I do remember I was definitely at burnout stage in one of my businesses, and I went down to see a client in Dover, which is the White Cliffs of Dover, sort of famous part of the country. Um, And one minute I was driving to the client meeting for a big pitch. And the next minute I'd gone straight past and I found myself on a ferry. And famously in Britain, you can go, France is 24 miles away from Britain at Dover. It's the closest point. And you can jump on a ferry, you can go across to France, you can buy little bottles of beer and cheap cigarettes, and then you could come back and do it all in a day. And I found myself on the boat in my car going to France. So I'd completely missed the meeting. I'd completely driven straight past it. And the first thing I remember being aware of was that I was on the boat. So I was committed. There's no turning round when you're 12 miles out to sea in your Volvo. You're there for the journey. And I realized at that point, something was going wrong. I was avoiding pitching for business. I was avoiding high stress meetings. I came back. I probably had a car full of cheap beer. Didn't tell my team, told my team that the client had cancelled, tried to reorganize it. The client obviously wasn't interested. But it happened a few times, that sort of version of a thing. But the most obvious one was that. So I definitely I was very burnt out and recognized that everything was sitting heavily on my own shoulders. I was the founder. I was the head of new business. I was the head of strategy. I had a junior team underneath me who were good, but they just had to do their jobs.
Yeah, they needed you still. They were good at the jobs you
Absolutely. And
gave them, but you
exactly.
were still the rainmaker. You were still the guy, kind of.
Yeah, and you take me out, there's no business. And
Sure.
that's so many of the businesses I've worked with subsequently. You realize that I encourage people, I say, make yourself redundant in your own business and then it's saleable
Right.
because they're going to buy, someone who buys your business is going to buy the business, not you. They might
Right.
like you, like your clients do, but they're going to buy your business and they're going to assume that you're going to get some terrible drug habit. You're going to blow it all on, I don't know, I was going to say what you're going to blow it on, but blow all the money, disappear. So what's left? If they've just given you millions of dollars, what's left behind? And that what they want is a really strong management team. They want a really strong proposition. They want a client base that love the service and the proposition. They want delivery on rails. They want automation and process so that they know what they bought is solid and repeatable, even if
Hmm.
you're not there.
Hmm.
And I think that's what informed emotional overdraft because I saw so many founders and entrepreneurs and even leaders, because I think it's pretty universal, who were just finding that the answer to every question was them.
Right.
So I define an emotional overdraft as subsidizing your business at the cost of your own mental or physical well-being. So subsidizing your business at the cost of your own mental or physical well-being. And everyone who's ever run a business, and there's some research in the book which I carried out, and spoiler alert, I'm going to tell you what happened. Everybody has an emotional overdraft. Everyone
Sure.
who's an entrepreneur, founder, or leader to some extent. But it's how quickly you can get back out of the overdraft. How can you pay the overdraft off and get back into solid debtless position again,
Yeah.
emotionally debtless position, determines how successful, how much impact you can have on your business.
Yeah, I would think it's almost like whether you own a business or even if you're a leader with like a big team, big P&L, you have to visit places of that are out of balance, right? Like, oh, okay, we've got this massive project going on or this big initiative going on.
Mm.
But then I'm guessing what you felt yourself and what you were seeing in your clients wasn't just people that were visiting this emotional overdraft, they were living an emotional overdraft. Is that right?
You've got it, and that's the point. We know that an overdraft. I think an overdraft is the same term in the States as the UK.
We don't
You know, so
use it a lot, so maybe define it for
So
us.
an overdraft is when you go to the bank and you
Deplete. Yeah,
have
like you
yeah you,
overdraft
you
your
have a
bank account.
facility. Yeah, you
Yeah.
have a facility to go beyond your actual say
Yeah.
beyond your money in the current account
Yeah.
for a short period of time. It's a sort of flexible thing, very expensive borrowing,
Yeah.
which the banks make a lot of money on, but you do it for a day or two if your bills are backing up, a bit of cash flow management, and then you go back out of overdraft.
Yep.
And the emotional overdraft, which is the term I coined for this idea of subsidizing your business at your own cost, is okay. Like you've just said, it's okay to go in your overdraft. If you're running your own business, you expect to have some late nights, not see your family as often. You expect to occasionally miss the gym. You expect it to feel stressful. You expect the pressure of, I had 50 people's mortgages riding on my shoulders. It felt like that. You
Sure.
expect that. But if you stay in your overdraft and you trade in your overdraft, what happens is your resilience, your ability to bounce back just gets eroded and eroded and eroded. You can't, it's the most expensive borrowing. That's where the term came from. It's a brilliant facility, but it's also extremely expensive.
Yeah.
So the good people come out of it, not the good people, that's too judgmental. The people that understand it and see it and can adapt, but the rest of us, we go into our overdraft and a lot of people stay there or stay there to some extent. And where that leads is to when your resilience sort of declines and declines, you end up with stress, burnout, overwhelm, depression, and all of these numbers, all of these digits we're seeing rising universally across
Right.
across the world post lockdown in a new environment where everything is we're reinventing business to some extent. It's not got better, it's got worse. So it's not weakness, it's the inability to get out of that emotional overdraft. And so what I did was being a researcher by training, I went and asked 50 business owners. I didn't have a name for it at the time, but I went and just said, these are the things I'm observing. Do you feel like this? And why do you think it's happening? And what I discovered was there are 10, roughly 10 drivers, I call them, or habits, behaviors, which are pretty universal. And the way to get out of an emotional overdraft is to understand where your drivers are. What are those behaviors and habits that are unhelpful to you and do something about it? There is nothing easy about it. It's
Right.
it's simple. They're simple that you don't have to go back to college. You don't have to do an MBA. You don't have to buy a book, although buy mine if you want to. You don't have to, you don't have to do any of that. You need to change habits. But as we know, there are so many books about habit. There's a whole genre of books about habit because it's really difficult to change your habits.
Right.
So
And
it's
especially when
simple,
those
but it's difficult.
habits, I mean, I think one of the things and I know you deal with this in your book, but I think part of it is, okay, even if you look back at when you said, you didn't even say, you literally, you just mentally checked out, ended up on this ferry, and all of a sudden you're like, what's going on? But when you have to come back, and am interested in hearing about what happened after that personally, but when someone owns the business, runs the team, is the guy, is the girl, whatever, even if they are really struggling and even if they are extremely emotionally and physically depleted, they also take a certain amount of pride or certainly identity from, how many business owners have you heard say? I mean, you're the one interviewing them, like, where, oh, well, if I'm not here, the whole thing will fall apart. Oh, if I take a week off, sales go down. And they almost say it like they're proud of it, even though
Mhm.
they shouldn't be proud of it. So I think there's like an identity, right, that goes with that, where it's like, well, and then there's some real risk of, okay, I'm not going to do everything anymore because I know, or everything anymore because I know it's not sustainable, right? I've got to let the sales team be the sales team. And there's this leap of faith of hopefully they'll step up, because if they don't, there really is a revenue attached to that owner, right? Or revenue attached to that leader. So in addition to like developing the habits, it's like, I'm assuming it's like overcoming fear, overcoming issues with identity, things like that.
Absolutely right. You've nailed it. But those things are habits
Yeah.
because it's the habit is I don't trust my team,
Yeah.
so I'm going to step back in. I don't
Yeah.
trust my team to do it, so I'm going to micromanage. I expect this to feel, I expect to suffer. I expect to work long hours. I expect not to be able to see my family.
It's a good
That's
point.
just being a leader. These are the things we tell ourselves. Those are habits because none of that's true. Genuinely, none of that is true. It's just not easy to change. And so the example of if I don't do it, the team aren't good enough. Well, let's look at that. Let's break that down into, I'm a business advisor. I've done this for, 15 years. What should you do? The answer is not, well, my team are poor. Should you train them? Should you coach them? Should
Right.
you replace them?
Right.
Those are the things you can do.
Right.
Not just go, well, but the answer is Andy's going to do it
Yeah.
and keep doing it because that's not scalable. It's not sustainable. And you will suffer for it one way or another. Either they'll get, I mean, micromanagers, the JFDI is one of which is my publisher insisted we call just flipping do it. But JFDI is this idea that you're a doer. You get in, you just get stuff done. I get stuff done. But if you do that, what the team do is the team will go, well, Ken's going to jump in and do this.
Yeah.
So we won't bother. There's no need for us to finish it. Ken's always going to come in and change it anyway. So we'll leave it. And then you wake up one morning, you think, I've got a demotivated team who don't seem to complete the work I've given them. I always have to step in and save them. I'll probably get rid. But what you've done is you've trained them.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as bad dogs, just bad owners.
Right.
You've trained those teams to go, well, Ken's going to step in, so we might as well leave it. And the good people, the motivated people go, I'm off. I'm,
Right.
I'm not staying here because I'm not feeling fulfilled. I'm not getting stretched. I'm not being respected. I'll go somewhere else where I can develop my career. The bad people sit there like sacks of potatoes because they're pretty inert
Yeah. It
anyway.
works for them.
Yeah, it works for them absolutely because
Yeah.
Ken's going
Yeah.
to do my job. That's
Yeah.
great. Thanks,
Yeah.
Ken. So
Yeah.
you get the good people leave, the bad people stay, the habits get worse, and you then your overdraft gets worse because you kind of believe your own self-speak, which is,
Yeah.
well, the team are no good. You've just
Yep.
created that. You've created that. And I'm not
Yep.
blaming people because it's normal. It's your business, baby.
Right.
There's no blame here at all. This is all normal human behavior. But there's so many things you can do to change it. There's so many things you can do to change it. And most of them are pretty boring. The whole second half of my book, when I first wrote the book, this is sort of book background stuff. I wrote the first 5 chapters basically, and I gave it to the publisher, and she said, "Where's the rest of the book?" And I said, What do you mean? This concept, emotional overdraft. I've written this incredible. I've invented this concept. It's going to
Mhm.
change the world." And she said, "Yeah, but Andy, you've got to do some. People need to do something about it. There's 10 chapters missing." And she was right. I had to write the other half of the book, and that's why it took me 2 years. So this the point is it's practical. You can do different things, but you have to see in the moment that you're behaving in a particular way. You have to spot those behaviors, take a pause, and then do something differently if you possibly can. And there's lots of tips and tricks for doing that.
How did you do it personally before you had all this knowledge of the 50 different business owners that you'd interviewed and you've written the book after that? And but you're coming back off the ferry. You're still having, you said, some more incidents like that. How did you recover and what led you into this work?
Well, I didn't with that business. What
Yeah,
happened was my very good friend David, who ran a big advertising agency, was talking to me about it, and I think I may have been in tears. I was having a terrible time because I couldn't give up, but I couldn't carry on. It was that awful, don't want to go to
sure.
work moment. And David said, "Look, I'll buy the business. You can roll your business into my business. We've got a whole load of account people who can run the accounts. You can just stay as a strategist, account lead. Um, I'll take your team on your creative team and put them into my creative team, and we'll work out a deal where if we can make some revenue out of it, you can get some revenue out over the next couple of years." So basically, he took the business on. I didn't make much money out of it, but all those people kept their jobs. None of my clients were let down once. And David and I now, spend our time going to the football together. We sit next to each other at our favorite football team. So
Oh, that's
sorry,
cool.
soccer
So
soccer team.
no, football's fine. It's only America that has to adjust
Mm.
that term. Um, so graceful exit from there leaves
Mhm.
you with, I'm assuming, some time on your hands now to reflect, or what? Like what happened in
Yeah,
the aftermath of
exactly.
that?
So where I discovered my answer, because I didn't have a name for it, but where I discovered the sort of the beginnings of the answer, I got myself a coach, which I really wish I'd done years ago. And I'm not saying this because I'm a coach and I'm busy, so I'm not plugging this at all. Um, I got myself a coach. In fact, I got 2 coaches, and one was a sort of life coach, and the other one was a business coach. And amazing lady called Rena Loizu, who worked with me, said to me something. There was a moment. There was an absolute moment, and she said, "Andy, your feelings are a measure of the quality of your thinking."
Mm,
I'll repeat it because it's so good. Your feelings are a measure of the quality of your thinking. And it took a while to sink in, but I woke up the following day, I think, and I'd got it. And so she's saying when you're getting frustrated, or you're getting angry, you're getting irritable, that's a really good indicator that your thinking is suboptimal. And at that point, if you can spot those emotions happening, you can do something differently. So those were my cue. That's where emotional overdraft comes for me. It's that idea. If you think I might be in my emotional overdraft, I might be making this worse, spot it, stop, and take a moment. So I mean, this is quite well known theory, but you're and this is not woo woo. This is I am a boring middle-aged white guy. So I there's no woo woo here. But your entire perception of the world is created in your own thinking. Your brain creates your perception of the world.
Totally.
Stuff on the outside is not affecting it. There's a brilliant book by Michael Neal called Inside Out Thinking. We create the reality in our own heads. So our thinking creates our emotions or feelings. Our feelings create our behaviors. We typically respond to our feelings, and our behaviors create our outcomes. And once I understood that, and particularly the idea that your feelings are that sort of they're like a sort of needles showing you how great how your thinking is, everything changed for me.
Yeah.
Absolutely everything changed. I had a difficult relationship with my teenage son at the time. I went home from that conversation and we sat down and spoke for 2 hours without drawing a breath. We hadn't spoken for 2 hours probably in the 6 months total
Right.
before that.
Right.
I suddenly understood that the frustration I was feeling about everything, the anger that I was feeling about everything, the irritableness, they were all a clue trying to tell me that the world I was creating was wrong
Right.
somewhere, was just not helping me and wasn't serving other people.
Isn't it so empowering? I had a really similar moment where it's so weird looking back because now to say, oh, I'm in charge of the way I think, like I get to control that, that sounds so easy and logical. But the first time you actually give yourself permission to do that or fully understand it is mind blowing, liberating, full of. I remember just going, I think I thought up until that moment that you had for myself that, well, the way I feel is based on external conditions that are like
Mhm.
happening to me, right? So, if you blow out a tire on the way to work and your boss gives you a bunch of shit and whatever, then the feeling that you should have based on those things is I feel like shit. And it's like, no, you don't have to feel any particular way, right? Like that is actually a choice that we're making, and we're making
Yeah.
it many, many, many times a day. But I honestly don't think I had, up until that moment, ever really thought about it as I get to construct this. And even if things happen that I didn't want to happen, or things happen that, are great that I didn't know were going to happen, I still get to digest that and show up and interpret that the way I want to, which is a
It's a
wild concept.
it is it's hugely evolved.
Yeah.
And they should teach it in schools, and they certainly didn't teach it in my school. At my school, it was man up, get on with
Yeah.
it.
Yep.
I mean, I damaged my both of my knees playing rugby. They, in the matron at the time, strapped my knee up and said, "You get on with it."
Yeah.
That's the sort of thing you were taught at school. They should teach this at school because it's game changing. Because you go to work and your boss is in a bad mood with you and lays into you for apparently no reason, and it ruins your day. Now you might go in and think, rather than taking it, because that negativity is pretty contagious. It feels contagious, it's not. But you might go, well, I wonder what's happening with him. I
Yeah.
wonder why he's feeling that way. I wonder what's happened. I wonder if there's something I can do to help him. I wonder
Right.
if, could I have done something differently? He's probably right. He's got some good points, some bad points. Your whole approach is different. I still find myself hanging out of the window of my car when someone cuts me up, shouting,
Right.
sometimes
Right.
because, we're still human beings. I'm not a Zen Buddhist,
Right.
but more often than not, I can spot that moment when the feelings are an indicator of the quality of my thinking, and then I can do something differently.
Well,
And
this is
it is
that.
a game changer.
Yeah, not to interrupt Andy, but this is the same thing of recognizing that behavior of when you're in emotional overdraft, right? It's like you're going to go there, from a work
You should go there.
standpoint,
It's helpful.
exactly. And it's the same thing with this kind of stuff is like, oh, am I actually reacting in a productive and appropriate way for this situation? And maybe, maybe not, but do I need to stay there? The guy cut me off in traffic. That was annoying. I can be pissed for 5 seconds, 5 minutes, or 5 days, like depending on how I want to deal with that. And
Mhm.
again, I think it comes back to that awareness. There's I've learned a lot, I think, in the last few years about just being okay with taking a pause and not being so reactive to everything, and the pause can be like,
Could be a
seconds.
beat.
Yeah, a
Yeah,
beat. And just like, hey, someone hits me with something that feels aggressive, a comment or whatever, my nature wants to maybe strike back. The thoughtful, hopefully more evolved side is that the best approach? Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe, who knows? Maybe that guy that cut you off when you wanted to hang out the window has a pregnant wife in the passenger seat. We don't know.
exactly that. Exactly that. And who hasn't driven a car and made a mistake and not spotted somebody else? And
Right.
you know, I have heard myself lean out the window and shout, do you live in the land of the bloody perfect? It's not,
Sure.
but who hasn't done that? And
Yeah.
you, I think there's a very useful exercise that I was taught, which is called I wonder. And you just, instead of going straight to, they're an arse and I'm
Yeah.
gonna, tell them what I think about them and that's gonna make me feel better, because it really won't make you feel better. It'll make you feel more, and then you're going to make bad decisions. You're driving a 1-ton bullet.
Right.
It's not the best time to be angry when you're driving a car.
Totally.
Play the I wonder game. Just do what you did there, which is go, I wonder why that person cut me up at the traffic. I wonder why they drove down the roadworks on the outside when they should have pulled in half a mile back and cut in front of me. I wonder why they did that.
Sure.
Like you say, maybe they are just an idiot.
Right.
But what got them to that place? And what else do they have to deal with because of that? Or maybe they got a pregnant wife, or maybe they're rushing somewhere, or we've all done it. And
Right.
maybe we just be a little bit tolerant this time. I'm not always. I'm absolutely not perfect at it. But if you wonder, so when the boss snaps at you unreasonably, when you hint 30 times a year what you'd like for Christmas and your wife buys you something completely different. Um, just talking about current scenario, I'm still mulling over from last Christmas. Um, she actually said to me, "You haven't told me what you wanted, so I thought you'd like this." And I said, "I think I've hinted about, 3 or 4 times a month since the summer. Anyway, let it go, Andy, let it go." But you can also go, well, that's a great example. Well, I wonder why my beautiful, caring, thoughtful wife, who's one of the nicest people I know, got me such a bloody awful Christmas present. Well, it's probably because she's busy when she's supposed to be semi-retired. She's fairly stressed by the work. She's taken on too much. She's worrying about her dad. She's worried about her kids because she always worries about her kids, even though they're grown-ups. She's dealing with, we're about to move house. She's dealing with some other stuff. And then you go, well, maybe you're getting me the wrong Christmas present is not such a big deal.
Right.
The fact is, she still tolerates all my crap. She's
Yeah.
still, she's still a lovely person, and she bought me something for Christmas, which doesn't always happen. So I wonder is a great and powerful thing to ask yourself if you can bring yourself to in the moment. Spot the moment when you're heading further into your overdraft. Spot that it's happening, and then give yourself pause to be kind to yourself
Yeah.
and just wonder what you could do differently. What could I have done differently? What could I do differently now? What can I do differently next time this happens?
Right. There's something I learned in recovery that's been like really good for life, which is sort of the keeping your side of the street clean, and
Mm.
I can't control anything that anybody else does. Anything that's thrown at me, anything circumstantial, that I can't control the weather. I mean, I can only control the way I react to it. And so there's, again, just that pause. What else could this mean? Or I wonder, right? I mean, just something, there's just beauty in the pause, and it allows you to make not only better decisions, but, you know, how many times I do it with people a lot, where let's say you have an important email that goes to a client, or it's a pitch on some presentation that you had and they needed something sent back over, and we don't hear back from a week, even though everything on the meeting went great. And our minds just, when we're left to fill in the blanks, we're just not very good at it naturally.
We're not.
It's just always like, I thought it went well. After a day, it's like, maybe it didn't go as well as I thought. After 3 days, it's like, they must hate me. After a week, you're like pissed off, and then but what else could this mean? Maybe the person left for vacation the next day and they're totally pumped to do business with you. You really have no idea, right? I,
Sorry to butt in. I call this the
oh, okay.
Oliver Principle, which is Oliver Twist, Charles
Yeah.
Dickens. And the Oliver Principle is that you say no to a client. You don't, they're being unreasonable, so you say no. And then in your brain you go, God, if I say no, then they're going to maybe question our relationship. And if they question the relationship, then they might put the business up to pitch. If they put the business up to pitch, only 1 in 10 businesses retains a client when they pitch the incumbent 1 in 10. So we're going to lose it. If I lose this particular account, my good team work on that. My good team are going to go somewhere else because we haven't got good enough work for them to work on. My good team will leave. My That'll mean I've got some pretty weak staff, which will mean I'm going to lose more clients. We're going to go bust. My wife's going to leave me. I'm going to have to sell my house. I'm going to go bust. I'm going to end up living under a bridge like Oliver Twist.
Right.
And that's how quickly we can get from, I better not say no to this client, to
Totally.
catastrophize it to the point. And so we make really bad decisions
Right.
based on what we create in our own heads. You're spot on. You're
Um,
absolutely spot on.
yeah, it's a pre-imagined programmed fear, that just is going to happen. So you're working with a couple of coaches coming out of this thing. You're learning a lot about yourself. You're learning a lot about other people. Did you start interviewing business owners right on the back of that time frame, or how did
No,
this go from it being something that helped you to something that you wanted to sort of share and make your life's work?
and it is my life's work. But
Yeah.
absolutely it is. It is my mission now is to share this idea with people because I think even if you just remember the phrase emotional overdraft, it'll be helpful
Yeah.
to everybody. So uh, there wasn't not immediately, but I did an opportunity came my way pretty soon after I'd had this coaching, and it was to lead. I was running quite a big advertising agency at the time, and they said to me, "Look, you're pretty good um, with running businesses and growing, building valuable businesses. Would you like to come and work with us? And we work with lots of businesses rather than just one at a time." And so I jumped, I took the risk. I imagine my wife rolled her eyes at the time because she often does when I do these things on a whim. But it was a great decision. So I could work with, I lost all of the staff management, which I love. I love working with people, but I lost all of that stuff and could just concentrate on how do you run a better business. And that's when I spend all day, every day, as I do now, working with founders and entrepreneurs and leadership teams to see how do we build a more valuable business. And then I started to notice this thing. I started to notice these behaviors. And I remember very distinctly one of my clients, we had, if you think of an emotional overdraft in a profit and loss, there's an invisible loss line or cost line. So we've got revenues at the top, we've got costs underneath, and we've got the profit on the bottom. We tend to look bottom right-hand corner. There's our profit for the year. We've done well. We've made a profit. But there's an invisible cost line in a profit and loss, and that is the cost to you emotionally or physically. So you've stopped taking exercise. You put on some weight. You maybe got a little bit of a heart problem. You've got some stress. Your teams aren't as working as well as they can. You've got a bit of staff churn happening. You don't see these. These are not as easily measurable as the management information you typically get. So that profit is a bit is supported by or subsidized by the emotional overdraft of you and your team and everyone in your business potentially.
Sure.
So that number is a lie anyway because there's an invisible number. But the accountants, and I love financial people, I love bean counters. Then they provide us with so much data, but they don't like this because you can't measure it. It's
Right.
hard to measure. But that's a subsidy. And I was in a board meeting with a client, and we were looking at the annual figures that we were going to share with their business. And we'd had 11 months out of 12 where we made a profit. And in one of the months, we made a loss, a small loss, a couple of £1,000. And they said, well, let's just do some accountancy trickery. We can move some work in progress around. We can turn that 2,000 a loss. We can borrow a bit from the month before and the month after, and we can make that a small profit. And then we've done 12 months profit every month of the year. We've made a profit. Didn't we do well? And I thought, what are these people doing here?
Yeah.
What are they? I mean, I understand there's a story they want to tell to the people in their business, but the reality was we made a loss in that month.
Right.
And we genuinely made a loss in that month. Now that's not terminal. They made had a reasonably profitable year. But what they really wanted to do was to tell themselves a story to make themselves feel good. And they'd missed that opportunity to understand what was going on. And it's little things like that, hundreds of little things like that, that I started to realize that everyone was thinking the same way. Everyone was getting by. Everyone was to a greater or lesser extent, running up this overdraft, subsidizing their businesses, and they were trying to pay it back by gaming the system. They were
Yeah.
trying to make themselves feel better by gaming it. Nothing had changed other than they moved some money around to make themselves feel better.
And isn't
It
what we're
didn't
talking
matter.
about overall, like really what they're doing, and the reason it's tough to measure is it's like you're sacrificing the long term in favor of the short term, right? I'll sacrifice my long-term integrity by pushing a couple numbers around because who cares? It was just depreciation or work in progress or whatever. But
Mm.
like personally when you move the number that you moved a number, right? And same with, oh, we made this huge profit number, but we know in the back of our mind that we've got a turnover problem and it's just getting worse all the
Well,
time. And it's just
and that I'm not well. I haven't been
yeah,
to the gym for 6 months. I've
right.
got a client of mine who we have half term in the UK, which is a kind of halfway through a semester, you have a week's break.
Yeah.
Um, Probably historically something to do with farming, I imagine. It's a legacy thing. But half term's a great holiday. It's a sort of October time holiday. You get a bit of a break. And this client had young kids, but never ever took half term off because he had a very young team and they would all go on holiday. He would want them to go and be with their families. And I said, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you not taking half term?" And he said, "Well, because I'm the leader, I'm the founder. I should be taking the pain." I said, "No, go and talk to your team." And the team went, "We have no idea why you're doing this." And they came up with the idea of sharing it around.
Yeah, rotating
They
or
said,
something.
"Yeah,
Yeah.
rotating it." I mean, it's a
Yeah.
simple idea. It wasn't difficult, but he felt, but the cost was he didn't see his kids, he didn't see his family as much as he should. Who knows what the implications are of that? So I've lost my point a little bit, but it's so easily done. It's so easy to end up.
Yeah, but instead he just is identifying at that point with like, oh, I'll just be the martyr. I'll just be, I'll
Well,
make the
because it's meant
sacrifice.
to feel like this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you
it's
feel
meant
like
to feel.
and I'm thinking American publicly traded companies, but I'm sure the British ones are exactly the same. Do you see cultural like systemic problems with this from a cultural standpoint at certain companies where I think I think a lot of publicly traded companies, they care about stock price. I mean, that's what they're there for, right? For the most part. I'm painting everyone with the same brush, but a lot of them, right? Just got to report, just got to make the number, just got to make the number, got to give a good forecast. That trickles its way down to you need to make the number, you need to give a good forecast, you need to, hit. And I feel like there's some very unique companies that are able to hold their culture together, drive the stock still, drive growth long term. But I feel like they're the exception and not the rule. I feel like there's a overbearing thing of if you want to do well in corporate America, 'cause we've been talking a lot about founders, but in the
Mhm.
corporate world, if you want to do well, it's almost like you're signing up to be an emotional overdraft, right? That is just part of the unless you want to stay at the same level. But if you're looking to move from, mid-level manager to a GM to a director to a VP, that's just what it takes. And I hear people talk like that all the time. Like that, hey, no, I am burnout and yeah, I'm kind of fat and yeah, I don't get to see my kids as much as I want, but
But
I'm
I'm
making
making
300
progress. I'm
grand a
earning the
year.
bucks.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's so interesting, that question. And it's absolutely not true that you have to be burnt out to be stressed. You
right.
do not have to be trading in your emotional overdraft. There are very successful. I agree. It is some cultures. I mean, Samsung recently, I mean, astonishingly announced that all of their middle management layer were going to work 6 days a week, and that was the answer. They found that was decided. That was the answer to their revenue drop question, was to make the managers work an extra day a week.
Mm,
I mean, that's going to make it worse. We know how that's going to make it
yeah.
worse. But South Korean culture, you just do what you're told, you say yes, and you carry on. But I think everything, all the research I've read says that if you have people who are feeling more resilient, if you have people who are healthy, if you have people that are mentally alert, who have strong support networks, who have a community or a societal responsibility as well as a business responsibility, these people, these well-rounded, well-balanced people, are the ones that contribute most.
Totally.
And so from a corporate point of view, what we have to do is be talking, and I'm talking to some, I won't name them, but I'm talking to some big organizations now in the UK about one of them's got 300 the next layer of managers, that the up and coming 300, I think they're called, or something like that. I'm going to speak to all 300 of them. So they're going, we can see, we can see that actually, if we don't get this right,
Mm.
what we have is a culture that will limit our ability to continue being an outstanding business.
Yeah.
This is an automotive company, which is astonishing. And they said, we've got our processes right. We've got our mechanicals right. Our product is right, but our people aren't.
Right.
And so I think we're seeing we can't sustain the levels of burnout. We can't sustain the levels of stress, the levels of anxiety, the levels of depression that we're seeing. And the companies that get that and change it organizationally are going to have sustainable advantage. They're
I agree.
undoubtedly going to have sustainable advantage.
I agree completely. And I was talking with someone, we kind of came onto this thing where I thought this was just so accurate, and I had never thought about it this way before until I had this guest on. But we were talking about millennials and the rap that millennials get around. Millennials don't want to work. Gen Zs don't want to work, and it's like, no, they maybe just don't want to work for you, and they don't want to sign up for something that they know is bad. Like they'll take, I'm again talking about an entire generation, right? There's exceptions, but in terms of how that stereotype works, it's like they're just saying like, no, they're just not signing up for the same thing their dad signed up for, which was maybe the 60-hour a week gig, being out of balance, being burnout, dying young, getting if you're lucky, Rolex, and if you're not lucky, a Seiko watch, and thank you for your troubles, and you can go sit on your couch at 70 years old. Like I think th- I think that generation just went, no, like we want more out of life than that. And
But why,
and
why do
I
you think they did that?
uh
They've watched
combination.
us, haven't they? Surely
Yeah.
they've
Well,
watched us
we
and gone, that's not the way to do it.
we were bad examples, or good, if you want to look at it as a lesson, depending. But yeah, I think exactly. I think they're going like, no, I'm like I've seen what you're doing, and that I think it's very evolved. I think for someone to go, no, I'd rather make half as much money for twice as much happiness, because that
It's
was,
what we wanted for them.
yes,
My kids are 30 and 31.
yeah,
I all I wanted was them to be well-adjusted, happy human beings.
yeah,
That's all. I didn't want them to be the highest earners. I didn't want them
right,
to be the next president. Oh God, I don't want them to be president of the States.
right,
I just wanted them to be well-adjusted and happy people who contributed to their society
yeah.
and got stimulation from that. And that's what they are. And I couldn't be happier.
Yeah, I feel the same
I,
way. But both my kids are in their 30s as well, and they both do well. But that's not their God. That's not their, that's not what they're waking up in the morning going, how can I make more money? That's not their thing, right? Their
mhm.
thing is much more balanced. Certainly more balanced than I was at their age.
I mean, yeah, you're right. I advise businesses on how to become more valuable, which often means making more profit.
Right.
My son is a handyman builder, and he works primarily with older people that can't normally afford it, because builders are busy everywhere.
Yeah.
So, they can charge what they want. And he charges smaller amounts so that these people can actually access it. And every now and again, we'll chat about it. And I'll say, well, you could double your hourly rate, Nat. You could
Right.
double your hourly rate and not and have just as much work. And he said, but that's not the point. The satisfaction he gets from working for those people and contributing to those people and helping those people, and also having his own life, which means if he's not charging top dollar, then they don't expect top dollar, which means he can take more time off. He can
Sure.
do the things he wants to do, is amazing. It's
Yes.
totally evolved, and I completely respect it.
Yeah.
And there's so much we could be learning. I also do agree with you. We can't generalize about entire generations.
Right.
I'm a Gen Xer, and both my kids are millennials. I mean, there are frankly lazy Gen Xers and incredibly motivated Gen
Sure.
Xers. There
Of
are,
course.
and everything in the middle. It's a normal distribution. It always was and always will be. But it's just nice to be able to feel something. It makes you feel good about yourself if you can generalize about millennials or Gen Zs. There is they're evolving. They're changing
Yes.
their expectations, but that's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just difficult. We have to learn again how to manage them. It just makes it hard.
No, I think we can learn from them for sure. So tell me about as you got into writing the book, as you got into the work that you're doing now, um, when did it become so once you got out of there, you started talking to business owners and everything. Did you go from that last assignment where you were working, analyzing and helping with lots of different companies into directly into what you're doing now, or like what was that
Yeah, so
transition?
I still do that job. I don't work with the same company I work for myself.
Yeah.
So I have half a dozen clients and I work with them. That's my day job.
Okay.
But when I did the research about 3 years ago, maybe, and that's when I came up with the idea of the name. I thought it's tangible and intangible, it's physical and non-physical, it's rational and irrational to say, or you might argue that there's definitely nothing irrational about emotions, but you might see it that way. And the name felt good, and I'm a marketing guy by training, so if you could package it well, give it a good name, it's gonna be easier to get to grips with. Give it a good label. But it took me another 2 years to write the book because I had a day job, so I took Fridays off. And I always say I don't work on Fridays, but actually what I do is I write on Fridays or I research on Fridays or I do stuff that is non-client stuff,
You're just
really.
not taking meetings, but you're staying
Yeah,
busy. Yeah.
yeah. And that's when I wrote the book. That's why it took quite as long as it did. And then it takes forever for publishers to do. It's the most antiquated business I've ever come across. Lovely, motivated people, but so slow and lots of editing and lots of that sort of stuff. So it took me 2 years to write it. It took another year for it to be published. It was published in January this year. So it's my day job is still working with my fantastic clients and they're all doing to a greater or lesser extent really well. But my mission in life is to spread the word about emotional overdraft. And what I'm loving is the feedback I get from people when they respond to it, that it matters and it changes people,
Yeah.
which is glorious.
I took your online assessment, which we'll put a
Oh, well
link in
done.
below. Yeah. And so I have some questions for you, and I don't mind being the guinea pig. We can share my results, good and
So this
bad,
is
I guess.
there's a free online assessment at emotionaloverdraft.com. And it's like we always call it the Cosmo quiz. Do you have Cosmo magazine, Cosmopolitan?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
My younger sister used to get Cosmo, and it was 50 questions that will tell you if your boyfriend will still be with you at the end of the summer.
Sure.
Things like that. I loved those things.
Yeah.
But this is 50 questions on yes, no questions really on your emotional overdraft, which then produces a spider chart that tells you where your key drivers are, where your key behaviors are.
So I'll share my results with you while we're talking here. So, and maybe you can help me understand it because I took it just
Interesting.
moments before we got on.
So there's also some people just listening to this, aren't there? So should I
Yeah,
describe this?
most people are listening, so we should describe it. So there's 10 categories, like you were saying before, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And is
it's 10 drivers, and if you do the self-assessment, it produces. They're all jumbled up, so you can't game the system if you wanted to, really, or try not to. And what it does is creates a spider chart which shows where your typical where your biggest drivers are, and they tend to be they're next to each other. The proximity of the drivers is where they tend to be most similar. So empathy and JFDI and expectations are all together on the sort of bottom right-hand quadrant. But my first reaction is that you have quite a low emotional overdraft. You've got some max score eights in here, eights out of 10. But the minimum score is five because everyone has some emotional overdraft. So you've got your highs are not that high. And
okay.
some of yours are very good and low. So you trust your team, you trust your people, you're not concerned about cost. You understand that you should spend in order to become more impactful. You manage your own expectations. So where you're looking peaky, I suppose, is self-worth jumps out at me, which is that means that the way you responded indicates that the way you see yourself is tied up in the way you behave in your business.
That's accurate.
And the danger of that is that you end up getting drawn back into being selfless in
Hmm.
terms of being the answer to everything. Because if you're not, you feel your self-worth is lower.
Makes
So that's
sense.
that, doing the business. The other one is at a loss. So that at a loss is the one where you can't think of an alternative. It's easier to just go, I'll do it,
I'll do
I'll
it.
fix
Yeah.
it, I'll get involved. Um, and that's about practice. That's learning new muscle behavior, mental muscle
This
behavior.
is 100% accurate, what I can see on it. So, I mean,
Great.
it really is because, I mean, yeah, nothing where the building's burning down in terms of deficiency here, but definitely that at a loss thing. I tend to under stress. I'll jump when the sun is shining and there's not a cloud in the sky and everything's perfect and cash flow is awesome. Then I'm perfect on this chart, and then and then the clouds come in and behavior changes a little bit, right? The patience goes down. I'll just do it. I know I shouldn't. I know I should probably explain it to you, but this is what is needed for right now. And again, sometimes that's okay. Staying there, not okay. Um,
And
yeah,
that's a good point you make, actually, because
yep,
it's a bit like SWOT analysis. When you've done SWOT analysis at college, every strength is a weakness, every opportunity is a threat. So to some extent, some of these things are great. And in a crisis moment,
right,
you step in and you do stuff. You're going to be the quicker solution because you know how to do it.
right,
That's okay. But if you habitually do that, then you're really limiting your impact. You're limiting your business. You're limiting your team. And
right.
that's really where, yeah, I mean, that's that idea of you accepting that you are the answer is really limiting from your own personal point of view as well.
I think
But
an
you
area,
you you are pretty, I mean, that spider chart shows me, and you also talked about your thinking, you understand, you've done some good thinking, personal understanding. That's quite a low emotional overdraft. You dip in and you dip out by the look of that, which is where you want to be. Absolutely where you want to be. I've seen people who are maxed out on 10, right, not right round, but certainly, four or five or six of the 10 drivers. I was talking to a guy who set up a US agency for a UK business, and he was fainting. He was self-medicating. He'd drink 2 bottles of wine by 6 o'clock each night. He was unwell, and that he went to a doctor, and the doctor said, you are very, very high levels of anxiety, high levels of stress. You've got some heart conditions coming on. And he absolutely refused to believe it. He just said, no, I'm not. The business is doing great. We're growing. We're employing more staff. We're making better profits than we're beating our targets. But the body knows.
yeah,
And his body. And one day he fainted. He was back in London for a few days. He fainted and was falling forwards and was going to fall into the traffic under a London bus. I mean, everyone
wow,
can picture a London bus. And someone was there and they grabbed him and hauled him backwards. So we can lie to ourselves,
sure.
but people are can be very deeply into their emotional overdrafts, and that's why I think this thing is so useful. The self-assessment's
No,
quick, isn't it? I mean, it didn't
it's
take you long.
no, it took me, I don't know, 15 minutes at the most. And
Yeah.
it is really spot on. It's really well done. Um and it's accurate. I mean, even when I look at a couple of things there, the relationship between the at a loss and trust, which is interesting here, where trust, saying I have ultimate trust. So you guys can't see the test results, but sort of ultimate trust in the team, but at the same time, kind of mid range for at a loss, meaning if I don't jump in, there'll be a loss. And how that manifests itself in the day to day is I do feel like, and this is incorrect, it's limiting my team. I do feel like I have to be the creator of everything, kind of, right?
Mhm.
Like the new ideas, the new software, then I'll hand it off. And then I do trust them to run it, right? Which is why the solid kind of score in that area in trust. But why do I have to be the one that creates everything, right? And I really do kind of operate that way, like where, oh, it's up to me, and I need to not just empower people to run with the systems that we have, but to think like owners
Mhm.
and
And so, what could you
encourage
do? How
vision.
how could you do that? What could you do differently?
I think giving them a voice, which they have now, but not specifically around like strategy and vision and some of those things, and to just allow the environment to be creative, to think of solutions rather than just run the playbook that
Yeah,
we
and it's
give to you to run.
expose them to some low level opportunities where
Yes.
there's less risk if they get it wrong.
Yeah.
Coach them, train them, give them opportunity to get on the tools, and the more they do that, the quicker you can run away from it.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. It's not easy to change that habit. Clearly, it's deeply ingrained in you. And I'm a coach, not a psychologist, so I don't know
Sure.
why you're like that. But going
Sure.
forwards, you can change that,
Right. Well, it's
and
funny
that's where
because
this is useful.
my own evolution, I mean, there was a time where I've clearly said out loud, not just to myself, that like I like being stressed. I like people who are stressed. It kind of showed back, but the old me was like, that means you care. Like if
Mhm.
you're not pissed off, you don't care. You know what I mean? And it was like, I literally have had people on my team a lot more, not my current team, but this is like 20 years ago, a lot more emotionally balanced than I was, who could handle a bad quarter, a bad
Mhm.
earnings report, a bad profit month, and I couldn't. Like I was so driven. And so to me, their balance, their emotional balance struck me as you just don't care enough. Like
They
if
don't
you're
care if they're
not,
not kicking filing cabinets. They don't care enough.
yeah, like what's that? If you're not outraged, you're not paying attention. And it's like, maybe I don't want to be outraged, If I get to have control over it, maybe that's an emotion I don't feel like living in. But yeah. Well, good stuff. What's the best way for people to work with you, Andy? Like, is it through I know you do coaching, but you tell me.
Yeah, I mean, I think please take away the expression emotional overdraft and
Yeah,
use it your own way. What I love is seeing what people do with it. Do the self-assessment online, emotionaloverdraft.com. Buy the book if you want to. It's at Amazon and everywhere where you buy books, so you can get
podcasts as
hold of it.
well.
Oh, and I have a podcast which is called Exploring Emotional Overdraft, where once a month I talk to someone about their emotional overdraft and what they do about it and how they handle it. And people are very brave and come on and pretty revealing about what they tell me. So yeah, it's all out there.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for being on. It's been awesome getting to know you. Love this
And
subject.
you.
Love the work that you're doing.
Thank you very much. It's been great talking to you, Ken.
Thank you. I hope our paths cross again soon. Take care.